I have an interesting project for the day. I've been asked to fill in the rear triangular section of this bicycle frame with sheet metal. There are several things that make this job challenging. First, there are very few straight sections. Now it is straight here and it is straight here, but everything else has a curve. There's a curve this way, there's a curve this way. Looking at a top view, the curves on the top tube are completely different from the curves on the bottom tube. And the sheet metal panels need to match both of these curves pretty closely or it just won't look right. So I'll show you the process I use to work through each of the challenges of this job. I'll make a pattern for the metal panels from chipboard. And my strategy is that there will be three basic areas. This is pretty much a flat plane in this area. This is pretty much a flat plane in this area. And I envision a somewhat flat plane that joins the two of them. But I need to mark out where the radius edges start. So using a straight edge, I can see that this radius starts right about here. This radius starts right about here. And this top radius ends at just about this point. So the metal part needs to have a contour that comes to these 2 points. And I'll just arbitrarily mark this junction as the end of the curve for this part. I'll start by measuring this angle, and then I'll transfer that angle onto a piece of chipboard. So this will fit into place approximately here. I know that I need a bend to start right at this point. So I'll mark one end of the bend, and the other end of the bend needs to match this point here. So this piece of paper is a little bit oversized. I'll kind of shuffle it around until I have it positioned where I think it needs to go, and then I'll put a mark at the bottom end of the bend. So I need a bend that connects these 2 points, and I can bend this over the edge of my bench. I'm bending it the wrong way just so I can utilize the marks I've made. Then I'll flip this over the other way and bend it in the opposite direction. Now we can try this into place. So that's a step in the right direction. Again, this piece is oversized a great deal, but I'll start trimming this to fit where it needs to go. So the first trim will be on the top edge. Let's see how that's fitting. Okay, so far so good. Looks like I need to trim a little bit off the bottom edge. Bit by bit we're getting this to work. Now when I make the sheet metal part, this will be a radius bend, but I'm using a sharp bend in the paper just to move the process along. So that's actually a pretty good start for where we're going. Now I could make all of this from one piece of metal, but I know that would be very, very challenging. So I'm going to make it from 2 pieces. One piece will incorporate this flat area in the return, and the second piece will encompass this area, and the second piece will have a slight bend down. The joint between the rear part and the front part will be halfway between where the bends start and the bends end. So putting this pattern into place, the back edge of this part will be here and here. And I can cut a straight line between those points. So that's pretty close to the pattern for the front part. Now I'll make a pattern for the rear portion. I've made some little support plates to go in the back. So this is just flat metal that I've welded a 1/4 inch spacer on. And this will hold the paper in the proper position. And later on when I'm fitting the metal, I'll use this same little fixture to hold the metal in the proper position. So I'll just lay a piece of paper into place, and then I'll reach in from the back side with a Sharpie and mark along the bottom edge of that tube. And now I can trim this on that line, and now I'll try this into place to see how it fits. And actually it seems to be fitting quite well. And I want to mark where the bend will go on this part as well. So I'll put a mark right against this line I've made on the bottom tube, and a mark against the line I made on the top tube, and I can bend this over the edge of my bench. So I think that's looking pretty good. Let's see how this piece integrates with the part we made for the front. I'll get this positioned where it goes. So I like the way this is headed. Again, when I actually make the bends on the sheet metal, this will be a radius bend, but we have 3 planes here that are fitting together pretty well and matching the contours of the bicycle frame pretty well. So I'm going to use these patterns now to cut out pieces of metal, then I'll slowly start fitting the metal pieces to the bicycle frame. The material I'm using is 19 gauge steel, which is 1 millimeter thick, and I'll lay the pattern on top of the metal blank, clamp it in place, and I'll mark the outline with a felt tip marker. So I'll cut on this line, and I'm using a jigsaw with a fine-tooth blade. I'll deburr this with a file and try it into place. I've sanded the edges of this part until I achieved a really nice fit against the frame, and now I want to put the bend in the front edge of this. So using my felt tip marker, I'll mark the point where the bend starts on both the top and the bottom. And then to bend it, I'll simply put the metal over a piece of tubing and press down with my hands. We'll try that into place. Looks like I need just a few degrees more on that, so I'll tap this with a hammer. So I need to trim this corner a little bit. It's binding against the bottom tube. So the shaping on this part has come along nicely. Let's change our focus now and work on the front. Using the paper pattern as a guide, I cut a piece of metal to the approximate size. This corner will be cut off later, but I've left it in place now because I need leverage to make the bend. So this bend line comes from the pattern. I need to make the bend on this side, so I've transferred that line to the other side. So I'm using a little bit smaller diameter tube here. So I'll hand bend this and then try it into place. I think it needs just a little bit more angle. So I think that's just about the right angle of bend. I can see that this surface matches this angle pretty closely. So I'll cut this corner off now and then try the piece into place to check the fit. I have the piece clamped into place and it's fitting reasonably well. Looking at the bottom, you can see there's a gap both at the front and at the back. That's because the metal is cut straight, but the tube actually has a curve to it. So I'm going to use a felt tip marker to mark the curve of the tube on the part. So I'll trim on this line and we'll check the fit again. So that's a much better fit across the bottom now. The top edge needs trimming as well, so I'll mark that with the felt tip marker and trim the top edge. So at this stage it's fitting pretty well. I want to put a curl on each of these edges, and I'm doing this for a couple of reasons. One is to give it a more finished appearance, but also I'm going to weld these edges continuously, and putting a curl on the edge will help prevent distortion from coming in toward the center of the panel. I'm going to use round over dies to curl the edges of the panel. On this edge I'm going to curl it down, and I'm using the 1/2 inch radius round over dies. So I'll make a pass through the beating machine with these dies. And these other edges I'm going to curl up with the 5/16 radius dies. So let's make a pass all along that bottom edge. And we'll try this into place on the frame. The front panel is fitting beautifully. Let's see how it matches the rear panel. They're very, very close. So the next step is I'm going to curl the bottom and the top of this rear piece with the round over dies. Both panels are fitted into place, and I'm very happy with how they're fitting. So now I'm going to scribe this for trimming. So the panels are overlapped. So when I cut on this trimmed edge, then I can butt weld the panels together. So I got 4 good tacks in place. I'm going to pull this off the bike frame now and hammer this joint to make sure I have good alignment before I make the finish weld. I'm going to work this joint over a pouce dolly to make sure everything's fitting together smoothly. That's fitting great, so now I can finish weld this joint. I'm going to weld in a small piece of metal to fill this notch. Now I can sand this smooth. Just for fun, I want to put a big hole in the middle of this panel. So I've laid out the location of the hole. It's equally spaced between the edges. And I'm going to use one of the Mittler Brothers punch and flare dies to make the hole. This is the largest size, 3-inch diameter. So the way this works is I center the part over the die. This part goes on top. The die halves are drawn together with a 1/2-inch bolt. And all I have to do is tighten the bolt and it will punch and flare the hole. Okay, that's bottomed out right there. So let's pull this apart and take a look. So there it is, a perfectly punched and flared hole. And this will be a nice accent on the bicycle frame. I've decided I like this hole so much, I'm going to put 3 smaller holes in this area. So I'll use different sizes of the punch and flare dies for those. So I love this hole layout. I'm glad I took the extra time to make these 3 smaller holes. You can see the fit up of the panel is excellent, so I'm just about ready to weld this into place. And before I do, it's important to grind the chrome away, because you can't make a good weld over chrome. So I'll use an abrasive disc to grind away the chrome every place I'm going to put a weld. I have the panel clamped into place and I'm ready to put tack welds on it. I'm going to be using silicon bronze filler rod, so this is called TIG brazing, and I'm doing this for a couple of reasons. One, I'll get less distortion if I use silicon bronze filler rod. And second, if I have any small gaps, it'll be easier to fill it with silicon bronze. With the tacks completed, I can do the finish welding. I finished the entire joint. I'm going to use a clean and strip disc to take the discoloration off. I'll move to the other side now. It'll be quite similar, but it needs a notch for the chain to go through. Well, the bicycle project is finished. Really, this job just requires some careful patterning, cutting, bending, and fitting, and I think it came out exceptionally well. I trust that many of you can use these techniques on your own projects. Please feel free to leave a comment, and I'll be glad to answer any questions you post. If you like this content, please support my channel by subscribing, and I'll see you next time.